How do I do this now? This thing is not loud enough. All right. You got me?
Yep, you got me. Can you hear me?
Not very well. Something happened when I tried to take that call. All right, you got me? No?
Yeah, I got you. What about the video? Is your video on? Says you're on mute. There you go.
All right.
Perfect.
All right, still can't hear you.
Well, it says you're good on my end. You got your microphones on and working, but you can't hear me.
Yeah. Very little. I mean, I had you perfect till that phone call came in. Let me retry it and call you back?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. All right.
All right, better? Can you hear me now?
Got you now, loud and clear.
Perfect.
All right.
Awesome. All right, let's do this. I'm going to get my Anchor app up and running, and we're good and ready to go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Coffee Time with Byron and Dave, episode number 22, with former Major League catcher Danny Sheaffer. How are you doing today? Are you staying safe out there?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Same, hanging in there. Loving your shirt, by the way, since we are here. Well, I am in the territory of the Rays. So where are you living nowadays? Are you close by where the Rays are, or?
I'm in the same time zone, but I'm in North Carolina. I'm in Western North Carolina, in the original town of Mayberry.
So are you a fan of the Rays, or?
Well, no, I actually managed for them for 8 years in the minor leagues before retiring when this whole disaster of a pandemic hit.
And they unfortunately cut you at the time.
Well, the team was eliminated in the Appalachian League, and I had 40 years in the game, so it was about time to go.
So yeah, I saw that, and I was going to ask you about that. Your time as a manager, is it a lot different from is it a lot different from playing? How hard is it to be a manager?
Well, I mean, I stepped out of the major leagues in 1998. And after 18 years of playing, and went right into managing for the Chicago Cubs in the Northwest League. So I had stepped out of the major leagues and went to the lowest level to manage, which was a real culture shock, and actually managed every level of minor league baseball, including 4 years of Memphis and AAA and for the Cardinals, and then finished up with rookie ball back in the Appalachian League, which is real close to my house, with the Rays. And in that time, the culture has changed. Baseball has changed drastically, and you had to adapt. And I think I did a good job adapting. But after 40 years in the game, I need to enjoy my family a little bit and get away from the hustle and bustle of the game.
So you were drafted by the Red Sox in '81 of the first round out of Clemson. Did you know you were going to be drafted in the first round, or did you expect to be drafted anywhere else?
No, I didn't. I mean, I received a phone call from my high school coach telling me I was drafted by the Orioles, the Baltimore Orioles, in the first round, and I had no clue. But I wasn't drafted by Baltimore; it was Boston. So he got the B right. But I found out by Western Union Telegram it's a little bit different now, how the way guys find out.
Yeah.
But when Western Union showed up at my house, and then Boston called me actually about 24 hours later. And so I had no clue it was going to be Boston, and I really didn't know what round it was going to be in.
That's amazing. So, like, where were you? Were you at home or what when you got the telegram?
I was at my home in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and remember getting the phone call, having to take the corded telephone on the wall, with the not a push button phone. It was the ringer phone. You had to go around the circle and getting the phone call from Charlie Wagner, who was a scout for Boston at the time, and that started a journey that just ended, a few months ago.
Yeah, because I see right after you got drafted, you would debut right away with the Red Sox. Take us through that major league experience.
Wow, I mean, I spent about 5 years in the minor leagues coming through the system, and I debuted in 1987, and that was in Milwaukee, and there were some Hall of Famers on the team with me and against me. We were playing against guys like Robin Yount and Paul Molitor, and teammates of mine were Wade Boggs and Jim Rice, and they're all Hall of Famers, and obviously Roger Clemens, and I was fortunate to be one of those guys to hit a home run in his first game, and really good for Boston. And then all of a sudden reality struck, and they figured out that I couldn't hit a slider if they told me it was coming for a while.
Now, you debuted a year after they went to the World Series in that Brent Buckner mishap.
Yeah.
Did you hear anything about that when you debuted?
Yeah, I did, and quite frankly, that year in 1986 that the Sox went to the World Series, I was playing in AAA Pawtucket, and I didn't understand the way the roster worked and understand the way that call-ups would work. I figured it out later, but I had won a batting title in the International League that year. I think I hit 340, and when it came time for September call-ups, the player that I wouldn't call him my backup, but he was another catcher on the team. They called him to the major leagues, and I found out later that he was on the major league roster, and there wasn't a roster spot to pick, and that's how it's done. I mean, it's really hard to get on a major league roster. And when they called up Dave Sachs, which he deserved it, he's a good player. I ended up watching the World Series, not realizing how close I would have been to playing in one at that time. And when Buckner had the ball goes through his legs, it was devastating for Boston. But I played with Bill the following year in Boston, and what a professional, what a nice guy, and just that's what people remember. Unfortunately, I think he was one of the greater players of our generation.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately they do remember him for that. Honestly, I don't know what's going on through his head today, but if I was him, I'd be half and half. I'd be still laughing it off to this day, and then be like, oh crap, I just cost my team a shot at the World Series.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's what people remember. But those of us that played with Bill, knew how great of a player he was. And unfortunately, I did see Bill a few years ago in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing an autograph show, and he got sick and recently passed away. But he was a professional, and one of the many teammates that I considered friends and was privileged to play with. And no.
Now, you were obviously a catcher, as you said. How tough is it to be a catcher? I know. When I was playing in Little League, I couldn't do it because I believe it's really tough. But tell the audience how tough it is to be a catcher.
Well, I was forced into it at a young age because of nobody else wanted to do it on the Little League team I was playing on, and I took to it pretty good. But I didn't have any instruction coming up as far as how to catch, in amateur baseball. Mm. And when I got to professional baseball, I could hit a little bit, which enabled me to make mistakes behind the plate. But later in my career, it became my strong point, and I've had some of the greatest catching coaches I think on the planet, with Ron Hasse and guys like Andy Semenek and also Dave Ricketts with the Cardinals, and in my time behind the plate, I think I caught about 1,600, maybe 1,650 professional games. It became a passion of mine, and I ended up writing the developmental program for the St. Louis Cardinals and also for the Houston Astros, and developed quite a few major league catchers along the way. And so it's a real difficult position to play, but if I look back, I don't think I would have ever succeeded at any other position, even though I played every position in the major leagues. For shortstop, catcher was my strong point.
Now, when your time in the Red Sox before, it looks like you went to the expansion team, the Rockies, in '93.
Right.
What do you remember most about playing for the Red Sox, or do you have a specific game you remember the most?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do remember, obviously, my first game with the Red Sox in Milwaukee, hitting a home run off Chris Bosio, and also getting my first major league hit that game as well. And I think when I look back at the Red Sox team, I was so young and really didn't appreciate what it meant to play in Fenway Park. And but the teammates stick out, like Wade Boggs and Jim Rice and Roger Clemens and Dwight Evans and Lee Smith. There were quite a few teammates that became good friends as the years went on. And but after I left Boston, I had a brief stint in Houston, or in Cleveland with the Indians, and that was in the All Star with guys like Joe Carter and Corey Snyder and AAA with the '93 and '94 in our inaugural years.
Yeah. Did you know, though, that when Rockies, when they were expanding Major League Baseball in '93, when they got the Marlins and the Rockies, did you know you were going to be a part of that expansion?
No, actually, when the expansion draft happened, I had already signed with the Rockies. The general manager of the Rockies was the assistant general manager of the Twins the year before. His name's Bob Gebhardt. And I had a couple of really good years with the Twins in AAA. And when he became the general manager, he signed me as a free agent in October, right before the expansion draft. And so, at best case scenario, I was speaking with some people that represented me at the time, and they said, you better take opportunity over money right now because of your age. And so I did. I took the Rockies instead of some better money with some other clubs that wasn't guaranteed. And so I went to spring training thinking, with the number of catchers on the roster, that I was going to end up in AAA Colorado Springs and hopefully get a chance to play on the expansion team. And when I had signed, they did not even have a manager yet in Colorado. And when Don Baylor signed to be a manager, Don was my teammate in Boston. I was a rookie and he was ending his career, and so we were familiar with each other. And I ended up making the team out of spring training in '93. And Joe Girardi and I were the catchers on Colorado for 2 years before I went to St. Louis. And so really with the Rockies, that was my springboard to another 5 or 6 years in the big leagues.
Now, when you were alongside Girardi, did you know he had the it factor in him? Did you know he was going to become a star?
Well, I knew he was going to be a good manager when the game was over. Joe was exposed to the expansion draft by the Cubs, and so the Cubs obviously didn't think they wanted to keep him, which was a mistake. But Joe ended up getting hurt a couple of times in 1993 and 1994, which allowed me to have a lot of playing time behind the plate, which solidified at least to the National League that I was a major league player, and that was somebody that could stick around a while. And the assistant general manager for the Rockies um, below Bob Gebhardt, ended up being the general manager of the Cardinals in 1995. And when he did that, he took me over to the Cardinals, and I had a 4-year run with St. Louis. So it's a networking game. Obviously, you got to be able to play and perform, but it's always good to have friends in the game.
Now, you finished off your career with the Redbirds, as you said. Mm-hmm. Was that before the McGuire days, or did you actually play with him at the end of your career?
No, I did play with Mark. We were playing in 1997 in Philadelphia at the trade deadline, and we ended up trading for Mark McGuire, and he joined us in Philadelphia while we were on the road. And I ended up playing with Mark for about 3 months in 1987, and then some in 1998 before I retired due to a couple of things, mainly injury and age. And
right.
And I tried to make a comeback in 1999 with the Cubs after shoulder surgery, and
just couldn't do it.
It was about time to go. I was 38 years old, and it didn't work as well as it used to.
So what would you say? Because obviously he was in that steroid era. You were pre and during steroid era in your career. Yeah. Would you say the steroid era helped the game of baseball?
I know there's a lot of rumors out there, and I know the Canseco rumors and some things about how many people were doing performance-enhancing drugs, and I don't know how true that is. I mean, I saw some of it while I was there, but not a lot. I would say that as many pitchers were getting help as hitters, so I'm going to say it balanced out. I think it was a fun game to watch. I think the fans loved it. Obviously, I'm not a fan of cheating in any way, whether it's
right.
enhancing or banging on trash cans or anything like that. But hey, it's part of our history. It didn't break any laws, and we moved on from it. But I don't like to see records broken that were not really achieved by natural means.
Now, surely you were teammates with one that did get, a couple that did accuse, one came out and finally admitted to it, McGuire. Plus you played against like Bonds and a young Sosa. Could you tell throughout watching them in their career that they took something because of how skinny they started out? Could you tell that?
Well, again, I'm not a doctor, but when you play against people and they come back to spring training and they look totally different in a uniform, and they can contribute it to working out a lot, but all of us worked out, but none of us got that big. And again, it's on their conscience whether they did it or whether they didn't do it. I know one thing. I know I faced a lot of pitchers who came back and were a lot bigger than they used to be. So obviously there was some stuff going on the other side of the ball as well. It's a stain for the game. I think each generation has its stain, though. You have the cheating scandal of a few years ago. You look back at the 60s and 70s, and people were talking about red juice and whatever that was, and some other stuff. So I don't think there's any innocence at all from generation to generation. I think every generation had its problems, and with technology the way it is, I think trying to cheat and get an upper edge is not going to go away anytime soon. I don't think it's good for the fans. I don't think it's good for the game. The integrity of the game. I'm a purist. I'm a naturalist in the game. I love the game the way it's supposed to be played. But some fans like it. I don't think most of them do. I think they want to see baseball players on the field.
I was one. I didn't like it. This was because I was born obviously in '91, so I watched the game throughout that era. Growing up, I didn't know what was going on. I knew something was up, but I still enjoyed it because I didn't know what was going on at the time. But once it found out, I was like, oh man, how dare you cheat the game?
Yeah.
I know it made it exciting, but why? Why cheat it? You would have been a Hall of Famer. You guys would have been Hall of Famers without the steroids. Why
Yeah.
do you have to feel you had to take it?
Well, I think they will be anyway at some point, whether it's by the Veterans Committee or something like that. And there's arguments to be made whether Pete Rose should be there. Whether guys like McGuire should be there, and Sosa, and those of us that have been in the game for decades and decades understand that there are people in the Hall of Fame that aren't clean, and we know that, and just some are taken as an example to be put out there as a scapegoat. And I'm not saying it's right. If we pulled everybody out of the Hall of Fame that actually cheated, whether it was through gambling, through steroids, through red juice, and just other stuff, we'd have some empty slots. There's no doubt about that. But you can't take away from what these guys did on the field. And guys did not all of a sudden become Superman because they took a substance. You still have to hit it. You still have to catch it. You still have to throw it. Might not have been as far, but these guys were monsters anyway. Sosa could hit a ball a mile. McGuire could hit a ball a mile even when he came up in '87. And so, I'm not going to say they should not be in the Hall of Fame. There's plenty of room, but that's the way we are as a culture right now. People want to cancel things out and make an example of people, and while they can let others skate, and I'm not a big fan of that.
In your opinion, though, your honest opinion, do you think they should be, though? In your honest opinion?
Well, you have to take what I said a few minutes ago. There are people in the Hall of Fame that have a checkered past. And under today's standards, they would not be in there. But so I think you have to look at what was done on the field. And, I don't think you can let one in and not let the other one in. I think it's either got to be all or none. And I don't think as a society that we're good enough to make that judgment. I mean, if I'm not going to mention names who are in there that I don't think should be, but if you're going to let some in, you got to let the rest of them in, or let none of them in, and make an example. But we're human beings, we're flawed, and people make mistakes. And I think in time, I'm not saying it's when they're alive, but I think in time, people will enter the Hall of Fame that the sports writers kept out.
Now, you were in the AL in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what year the George Brett incident was with the bat.
Right.
Do you remember if you were in the majors at the time? Were you in the minors? How do you remember when that was?
Yeah, I was playing at that time, but it was pine tar up on the bat. It didn't help the ball go, over the fence. And again, it's in the rule book. You can't have foreign substance, past a certain mark on the bat. Again, I think George was just made an example and made for a great YouTube video, and it made for great history, but I don't think it's the right call.
I agree with you. To this day, they're still banging him on that, but
Yeah.
But hey, like you said, it is what it is. It what happened. It was a mistake, but whatever. So, let's get back into your coaching tenure. You were obviously with the Rays, like you said. Was that the only team that you coached for? Was the Rays?
No. I started managing in 1999 in June, the year I retired with the Chicago Cubs, and I managed in the minor leagues with them for about 2 years, and then I went to the Cardinals and managed in the minor leagues with them for 6 years, and as well as being a catching coordinator over there. I managed A-ball, AA, and 4 years of AAA with them in Memphis, and then I went to Houston, and I was a manager there for a year before becoming a catching coordinator for 5 or 6 years in Houston. After leaving Houston in 2012, I became a minor league manager for the Tampa Bay Rays, and so after 18 years of playing, I think I did 21 or 22 years of player development for 3 different organizations.
Any big names you remember coaching that went up to the majors?
Yeah, I couldn't help but coach a lot of guys because of the years that I spent, but I think my boys were counting. I have 2 sons as well as a daughter, but my boys were counting not long ago. I think I managed about 192 big leaguers.
Wow, that's awesome.
And there are some Hall of Famers that are going to be in there as well. And I've managed a lot of good players. I mean, I've had the joy of managing Yadier Molina and actually calling him up at 2:00 in the morning and telling him he was going to the big leagues. I've had the joy of managing Adam Wainwright and sending him to the big leagues, as well as Dan Herron. Just like Brent Honeywell, another young kid with the Rays. Houston, guys like Jose Altuve, J.D. Martinez, guys like George Springer, Jason Castro, Dallas Keuchel, and the list goes on. There's just so many of them that I've had an opportunity to write their name in the lineup and to help them develop. And so that's the joy of managing, being able to be part of guys' dream to reach the big leagues. And so there's been a bunch of them.
Which ones were easiest to manage that just allowed you to manage them and not fight back?
Well, the guys that I just mentioned were all young. Guys like Yachty, I had him when he was 17 and was able to send him to the big leagues at, I believe, 21 years old. He was a young, immature kid that had unbelievable talent. We know he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. The guys like Adam Wainwright, he was a piece of cake to manage. He was a young kid that we traded for Atlanta, and he came over to St. Louis. And Brent Honeywell was probably the easiest guy to manage because we didn't have to do anything. We just let him play and just had to stay out of his way. There were some that were not difficult, but were challenging because of the way baseball was at the time. Like Jose Altuve, he was a low A ball backup infielder at best, according to some people in the system, and actually some didn't even want to keep him. And a few of us fought for him, and he ended up being obviously batting champion. He's an all-star, and if he keeps going, he's going to Cooperstown. So there's many stories that we'd sit around in boardrooms and talk about players, and most people had written off. And those of us that have been in the game, that have played a long time and have seen a lot of things, know that there's a certain factor with players, and you can see it. And you just you got to take away their size. You got to take away what numbers they had last year. You got to take away what round they were drafted in or weren't drafted in, and look at the player as an individual and say that guy's going to be a star. And we don't have enough time to talk about the guys that the industry wanted to dispose of. But the dozens of people in player development that would fight for these guys in many or different organizations. These guys end up being stars that nobody would have ever heard of if people didn't fight for them.
So this is a 2-part question. The first part of the question is you being behind the home plate, catching pitchers in your career. Who'd you enjoy catching for the most?
Okay. Well, early in my career, obviously Roger Clemens was a joy to catch. He was young as well, and he was electric, and he was a lot of fun. As I moved on, and when I got to St. Louis, guys like Andy Bennis and Todd Stottlemyre and Dennis Eckersley were a joy to catch. Lee Smith was a joy to catch early in my career with Boston. There's just so many that those were just a few. Greg Swindell in Cleveland was fun to catch. Rockies, we didn't have a whole lot of guys that had a lot of success on the mound because of many different reasons, but
Right.
The altitude had something to do with it. But when I got to St. Louis, Stottlemyre was a joy to catch along with Bennis and Eckersley.
And the second part of the question is, you up at the plate as a catcher. What pitchers did you do well against, and what pitchers did you not do well against?
First, I'll start off with what I didn't do well against. That's pretty easy. When I looked on the mound and saw a guy like Randy Johnson out there, even though I got my last major league hit off Randy Johnson, it was in spring training, and it was a double, so it actually didn't count on the stats, but it did in my. Looking back, guys like Dave Stieb, guys like Dave Stewart, I did not hit well against those guys at all. Now, on the other hand, guys that I did do well against, surprisingly well, were guys like Tom Glavine, guys like Greg Maddux. I did hit well against Lee Smith. I did hit well against Andy Bennis. I hit well against the Atlanta Braves in general. But those guys like Dave Stieb and Dave Stewart, I couldn't hit those guys if I had a tree in my hand.
Now, how tell the audience, how is it that you control what the pitcher throws? Because I'm confused myself, because I was never a catcher, and nor did I want to be. I was always fascinated by that. How do you guys manage that? I know it's a communication thing, but how does that come about? The communication of what to throw, how to throw it, the numbers or whatever. How does that come about as a catcher to pitcher relationship?
Okay, again, the game has evolved big time, and it's changed. It's changed drastically how things are done now. And I don't think it's for the better at all. But as far as game management is the term that we use. Obviously, we have a game plan before every game, regardless of what team that I played with. And I'll use St. Louis for an example, because Tony La Russa was one of the most organized men I've ever seen in my life, and Dave Duncan as well as a pitching coach. Mm-hmm. We would go over the opposing lineup every day on what plan we wanted to use to attack the player, what player we did not want to beat us, what pitcher would come out of the bullpen and what his plan was, et cetera, et cetera. But when the game started, there was hardly ever, I can't remember a dozen in 18 years of playing, a dozen pitches being called from the bench. Everything was called based on what the catcher saw, what I saw behind the plate, or what the pitcher saw. Obviously, he had the final say, but, it's when you look at criteria for game management, we looked at the count, we looked at the situation, we looked at the scoreboard, and we looked at the ability or inability of the pitcher to locate the pitch. Very seldom did we ever think of calling a pitch based on who was at the plate, unless it was Barry Bonds or Tony Gwynn or Wade Boggs or one of those guys. And again, this generation, it would be Mookie Betts and Mike Trout and Christian Yelich and J.D. Martinez and Fernando Tatis and Acuna, and Freeman. Those kind of guys can beat you. And so you pitch around those guys a little bit. But for the most part, whatever was working for the pitcher, whatever his strong point was, that's what we threw.
Did you have, in your tenure, did you have any playoff runs that you remember?
Yeah, we did. it's hard to play in the World Series, and it's hard to make it there. In '87 or '88 with the Red Sox, I was briefly called up for a couple of weeks, and they ended up going and playing, I think, the Oakland A's in the playoffs, and I didn't get a chance to experience that because I wasn't there in September. The next possible playoff run was in 1996 with the St. Louis Cardinals, and we ended up winning the Central. We ended up beating the San Diego Padres and moving on to the National League Championship Series against the Atlanta Braves. And we somehow found ourselves up in the series 3-1 in a 7-game series. Pretty good chance to go to the World Series against the Yankees in 1996. But if you look at the history books, the Braves played them. They beat us 3 games in a row to go to the World Series, and they ended up throwing Smoltz, Maddox, and Glavine. Us final 3 games, and we coughed it up, and they went to play the Yankees, and we went home. So, but I ended up getting a World Series ring with the St. Louis Cardinals. We won the World Series in 2006 when I was managing the AAA Memphis. So, it wasn't as rewarding as being a player, but it's still nice to have a couple of World Series rings.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I know you would have loved it to have as a player, of course, but yeah, it's just that knowing that you have at least something, you're a part of something,
right?
That just awesome. Yeah, I mean, I briefly remember that because the Padres. I started watching it when Tony Gwynn was a beast for them in '98. Yeah, it was about that time, '96. You said when you faced them. Yeah. So the Padres, I know, were a powerhouse team, but I know nobody could match, like you said, the Braves. That pitching staff. Ooh, that was rivaled the best pitching staff. Would you say of that era?
There's no question about it. I think they went on a 13-year or 12-year playoff run, and they were great. They not only had great pitching, they had a great offense too. You have Chipper Jones playing, and you have
Brian Jordan.
Fred McGriff at first base,
yep.
and Andrew Jones, and those guys were so good. But they were the best of the best, and they deserved it. They were great.
So back to current day, what team do you feel has the best case of going to the World Series and winning numerous amount of World Series?
I wouldn't bet anything against the Padres or the Dodgers now. They have young, exciting players that want to play the game. I loved watching the Dodgers last year. They were so good. The Rays they're doing things with mirrors. They have a payroll that's below most clubs. They do a great job in finding talent that nobody wants, like Joey Wendell. They have a wonderful scouting staff, and so they're going to be in competition in that AL East. Yankees are disappointing. It's all or nothing with them, but when you look at, I think with the general manager hire that the Boston Red Sox have with Chaim Bloom, one of the smartest men in baseball, one of the better people in baseball as well. He's going to turn that franchise around. But when it comes to just flat out talent, I don't know how you can beat the Dodgers and the Padres. It just happened to be in the same division. So one of those teams is going to the World Series and one's going home.
Now, do you like what baseball is trying to do now with them? Is bring back a rivalry to the West Coast? Because it was mainly on the East Coast. You had all these big names, big players over on the East Coast, but yet on the West Coast, like Mike Trout and that, they're not getting enough to get out their big name players. Because you hear about, like we talked about, Mike Trout, for example.
Yeah.
He can win the Triple Crown for all we know every year, and nobody would still notice him. Now, I know part of that is because he wants it that way, but don't you feel like baseball has to do better of managing their players and getting the game out there so people can watch?
Well, I don't think anybody wants to win a World Series more than Mike Trout, and it's a shame that he hasn't been in one. He's the greatest player I've ever seen.
By far.
Besides Bonds, he's the greatest player I've ever seen.
Oh,
and, it's a shame that he goes home before anybody else. Now, I hope that's a little different this year. I'm not a real big fan, and I'm not going to hide it. I'm not a real big fan of the direction the game's going right now, and the rule changes and just the way the game's played in general. I'm excited for the younger generation that comes up that has some flair and has some swagger about them. But I said earlier, I'm a traditionalist. I'm not considering myself old school because that just labels you. I love the new players as well, but in general, I do not like the way the game's going. I don't think it's marketed very well. We just came off a pandemic year, and you try to watch a game on MLB TV, and you got 6 blackouts. And they only allow 25% of people in the games. I don't like that at all.
I don't either.
But I don't think you can find a fan in baseball that has been a fan for more than 15 years or 10 years that likes the rules that are there.
And I agree with you on that. It's unfortunate because I know when you played back in the day, which I like how it was played, traditionalist. That's how I learned in Little League growing up.
Yeah.
Was move the runner over, steal a base, or hit a double, single, whatever, and be happy with it. Nowadays, it's just strikeout, walk, or home run. And to me, that's boring.
If you look at the last 2 World Series champions, though, especially 2 years ago, the Red Sox, they played the game the right way. They moved runners when they had to. They got runners in. They played the game the way it's supposed to be played. Last year, the Dodgers pretty much the same way. But I couldn't see spending the kind of money people spend to go see a baseball game.
Same.
And watching 21 strikeouts and no stolen bases and no sacrifice bunts. And the problem is this. The problem is what's played at the major league level, it bleeds down to the lowest levels of player development, not only in the minor leagues, but also in college and high school and below that. And this is the future of the game. The game always corrects itself. Just remember that. The game always corrects itself. It just takes time to do it. It may come back with different terminology. It may come back with a different look, but eventually the game will come back to its roots. It always has. It has been for 40 years. And it takes about 7 or 8 years to come back. And I think we're on that downhill spiral, especially when you see guys like Tony La Russa coming back to manage and leaving Lance Lynn pitch a 9-inning complete game.
Yep.
That never happened a couple of years ago. You see guys throwing a no-hitter. Those guys are coming out of the game.
And Dusty Baker coming back a couple years ago.
No doubt. And so you have guys, like Joe Madden in Anaheim and Tony La Russa. The old managers aren't coming back anymore, but hopefully the game kind of swings back a little bit. It's not coming back the way it always was, but baseball's fun to watch things happen. The 3-pitcher or the 3-hitter rule that a guy has to face, it's ridiculous.
It is. I agree.
Find any likes that.
And I don't like the opener either that the Rays started. I don't like that.
Well, it proved well for them, but in the end, when you look at Tampa, even though they put food on my table for years, Game 6 in the World Series, and you take Blake Snell out of the game.
That's what I'm saying. I'm still upset to this day on that.
Yeah, but it's always easy to be an armchair quarterback if somebody comes in and gets those 3 outs in the 7th inning last year or 6th inning, whenever he came out. It's a different story. It's always easy to armchair quarterback, but I had the pleasure of knowing guys like Bob Feller and Bob Gibson and people like that, and you're not going to take the ball out of their hand. I know the game has changed. I get it, and there are some things that we can't stop, but there's got to be some feel in the game too, and you've got pitchers like Musgrove throwing a no-hitter, and nobody thought about taking him out of the game. But this 5 and dive stuff for 4 innings and out of the game and bring somebody else in, who wants to go see that? I don't want to see that. When I was growing up, we'd go to a game at Veterans Stadium and watch Steve Carlton pitch, and we expected to see him pitch into the 8th and 9th inning. We'd go watch Jim Palmer pitch, and guys like that. We didn't want to see them coming out of the game in the 4th and the 5th inning.
And and looking back at that game, I don't blame Snell, because that's how it was throughout that whole postseason. I get that they wanted, because they were going to obviously trade him. Thank God to my Padres, much better team now. But I get that they didn't want him to get hurt again. But regardless, it's Game 6 of the freaking World Series. He's pitching a gem, no hit ball pretty much. And you take him out after 5. So I don't blame him for being pissed like he was. Like, let the dude pitch. I get the game has changed, like you said, in the damn analytics, which I hate. But regardless, let the dude pitch. He's dominating. His stuff hasn't decreased. It wasn't decreased during the game. Let the dude pitch. You agree with that?
Yeah, the analytical part of the game is a necessary part. It's just part of the evolution of the game. I don't think it's anything we didn't know. It's just it's renamed. They talk about the spin rate of a ball or the tilt of a ball. When, we didn't have the exact numbers, but we knew that guy had a ball that sank like crazy, or had a guy that its ball exploded late in the delivery. We just couldn't quantify it, which is a big word nowadays. And you got the attack angle of the bat, or whatever it is, or exit velocity of a ball that's hit. If a ball comes off the bat at 110 miles an hour 20 years ago, that ball was smoked. It's the same thing. It's just we don't have a way to quantify it back in the day. We do now. So the numbers are good, but they're there, but they're just a part of it. I think that both and is a great solution for this, not either or. And so if we use both common sense eyes and wisdom of baseball people, combine that with the analytics and actually get a plan, I think you might have something. But unfortunately, the game is bent to analytics trumping everything. And that's one reason I'm out of the game, other than the fact that I'll be 60 years old in August, and I've had 40 years in the game. I'm just not willing to fight that battle right now anymore. I'll do things on my own and help kids develop in the amateur side, and sending kids to college, and calling scouts up once in a while when I see a player that needs to be looked at. That's where my value is, because I'm not willing to sit down and just kind of void everything I've done in the game and listen to somebody that's never played.
So ultimately, in the end, how does the game get changed back to the way that we love and enjoy? How do you think it gets back to that?
Well, again, this is a money-making business, and I think when the consumer drives the business, then the game will change. If people start packing the stadiums to see 20 strikeouts and 4 home runs a game and 4 hits or 5 hits, there's no reason to change it. if people keep packing the stadiums, you know, to see people pitch 4 2/3 and then come out of the game, if the game stays the way it is and the rules stay the way they are, and, you know, we have, you know, the mound moved back, or we have the bases enlarged, or whatever we do to make the offense better, if the stadiums are still packed, there's not going to be a change. But it's a supply and demand sport. If nobody wants to come and watch that stuff, then there'll be change back to the way it was. And, you know, I'm a little pessimistic about that, and the reason I'm pessimistic about it is because, you know, I deal with amateur players every single day, and I have influenced a lot of kids, and we talk about baseball, but nobody's ever heard of Lou Brock. Nobody's ever heard of Kirby Puckett. Nobody's ever heard of Wade Boggs. Nobody's ever heard of Bob Gibson. Nobody's ever heard of George Brett. And crying out loud, right over my shoulder, there's 2 signed pictures of Cal Ripken Jr. They don't even know who that was. And so until we educate today's players on the game, ownership can do whatever they want, because, you know, they're dealing with people with a very limited knowledge of the game.
I agree. And now I gotta ask you a tough question. Maybe it'll get solved. I don't know. I hope so, for the game's sake. You went through the lockout year of '94, just like my last guest I had, Jeff Rosero, former pitcher. You all went through that lockout in '94. With what happened last year, with this whole 60-game crap and the whole owners and players fighting it out, do you see another lockout happening?
It would destroy the game, another lockout. I've been through one in 1981, and I was only in rookie ball, which enabled me to play in the Hall of Fame game in Cooperstown that year, because the big leagues were on strike. And so the Yankees played the Red Sox, the 2 rookie ball teams. And so that was my first experience. The second experience was in 1990 when the spring training lockout was, and I was in AAA ball with the Pirates and was unable to go to Major League camp, which I think cost me another year in the big leagues. And then finally in 1994, when we walked out on the 15th of August, and I had just spent 2 years in the big leagues, and the last thing I wanted to do was walk out for many reasons. I was getting older, you know, the paychecks were good, and I had felt at the time that you know, I thought it could have been solved way before that. And I just think it was a power play by both ends, and it ended up hurting the game. And it took the '98 home run bash with McGuire and Sosa and those guys to kind of bring it back a little bit. But if this game has another lockout, with the way society is, just getting out of a pandemic, with the owners taking a hit in the pocket because of the fans not coming back in the game, with this generation of players that have never been through a lockout, that make a ton of money, I think it'll be a nail in the coffin for baseball. And I don't think society has patience enough to say that I'm going to wait for billionaires and millionaires to figure it out.
I agree. I have to agree with you. It's going to be killer for the game. I don't think they would be able to recover it, especially with all the money already being wasted from this pandemic. So I agree on that. Since now we're talking about that, I gotta ask you about the guy who works for the owners, Commissioner Manfred. You've been through Selig, and you've been through Manfred a couple years there as a coach. How do you feel? What's he done for the game to help? Do you feel like they're both the same, Selig and Manfred?
No, I think they're polar opposites. And
do you think one's destroyed the game? What?
I've seen Billy Kuhn. I've seen Bart Giamatti. I've seen Bud Selig. And I think Selig, for the most part, really understood the game because he was an owner. Obviously, I think he leaned toward ownership side when it came to a lot of things, which he was employed by the owner, so I don't blame him for that at all. Sometimes we got to be careful about what we have and what we wish for. And I think Bud was very good for the game. I think some of the things he did wild card wise and stuff like that were good for the game. But to be honest with you, I can't find one retired player that has too many positive things to say about the direction of the game right now. And I wish they'd put the brakes on it and just say, wait, just chill a while and let the game happen instead of always trying to reinvent the wheel. I mean, for crying out loud, they're trying to speed the game up, and yet they have the replay system that slows it down.
Yeah. Correct.
I'm not saying that, look, baseball is an entertainment business. And, to see Lou Piniella come out and, have a conniption fit, or to see, Earl Weaver come out, or Sparky Anderson, or guys that come out, or Jim Leland, and it's come out and have a nice argument and, spur the fans on. It's kind of entertaining to watch. And now you have to just wait for the Supreme Court to make a decision, and you can't argue. And that's boring baseball.
Yeah, you're right. We got 6 minutes left, so we'll finish off with these two questions. I know you were behind the plate, so what umpire did you hate the most catching?
Well, I'm not sure that hate's the word, because
okay, disliked. How about that?
I had to have a relationship with all the umpires in order to, even if it was fake, to get my pitching staff, get them in the best possible position to be in. Ken Kaiser back in the American League was really, really tough to deal with. But there were some that were, for example, when I had Joe West behind the plate, Joe made his presence known. He wanted people to know he was in charge, but Joe deep down is a really good dude, and he just sometimes likes to bow up and tell you he's the boss. But I had so many umpires behind the plate that treated me very, very, very well. Bruce Fremming, when he was umpiring, he wanted to make his presence known as well. And he was very, very good with veterans, but I was a rookie with him at the time. And, he wanted to make sure he knew he was in charge. On the other end of it, when you look at guys like Harry Wendelstedt, Richie Garcia, Eric Gregg, those guys were really good to me behind the plate. They'd ask how the family was, they asked how the kids were by name, and but for the most part, I don't have anything negative to say about umpires. But they got a tough job. They're making somebody happy each pitch and making somebody mad. But in the most part, there's not an umpire out there that I would not sit down and have dinner with.
There you go. I like that. And last question, I will leave you on real quick. I know it's early, but World Series prediction: who you got winning it, and how many games, and who are the teams?
Well, the World Series winner is going to come from the West, is my opinion. I think when you're throwing 3 Cy Young winners out there, one rotation, you can't lose in the long run. It's going to be the Dodgers. It's going to be the Padres. It's going to be the A's. It's going to be a West Coast winner. I think the Giants are going to fade. Obviously, the best talent in the world's in Anaheim. I don't think they're going to compete in the American League West. But I'm not going to Pete Rose it and put money on it at all. I'm not saying he did it, but if I'm going to bet, I'm going with the Dodgers again.
There you go. I like it.
Yep.
I'm going
with the Dodgers in 7 games.
There you go.
The reason I go 7 games is because baseball needs a 7th game.
They do. I agree. You're not lying on that one. You're not lying. But hey, I had an awesome time with you. I hope you had a fun time as well. I want you to come back on as many times as you'd like. I got your number. You can text me anytime you'd like. I will do the same. And hey, also help us out if you can. But we're always looking for more interviews. So if you know any people, give them to me and I'll reach out to them.
All right. That sounds good. All right.
Perfect. And before I let you go, do you want a copy of this episode, so you can listen to it?
Sure. Is it going to be off or just visual video as well?
It's video as well. I'll give you the YouTube, because we're on YouTube as well, and I'll give you the audio portion.
All right. Sounds like a winner.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I'll be texting you soon.
Thanks, man.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.